affectionately referred to as the life-giving teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. We thank Allah for his divine and his merciful intervening into the rough and tumultuous affairs of the black man and woman of America, having come 9,000 miles by himself from the holy city of Mecca to Detroit, Michigan, to visit an area of Detroit called Black Bottom. There's something of a double meaning because it was a place where many black folk were on the bottom of society, but it was also given that name because of the rich, fertile black soil that was in that part of Detroit when it was founded. We thank Allah that he came in the divine person of Master Farad Muhammad. We thank him for raising from our midst his messenger Messiah, the exalted Christ, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we thank them both for having an extension of the love, the power, and the wisdom of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad that has come to us in the form of a well-made man, a brother that has been a friend to the black people of America, a brother that has been a guide for us, a brother that, unbeknownst to many of us, has defended us.
Yes, sir.
I say it's unbeknownst to many of us because sometimes we are just meandering through life and don't even know the attacks that are waged against us as a people. But the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has always been a defender of us as a people. And he has been one who has suffered on our behalf. He really is a champion of our people. I know we saw the fight last night, but the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is a champion of our people. And I believe that time and circumstances is revealing that he is Allah's anointed servant.
Yes, sir.
A man that is anointed to pour oil in our womb, to preach liberty to the captives, to bind the brokenhearted, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. I believe that time and circumstances are revealing that Minister Farrakhan is a Messiah among us today.
Yes, sir.
Beloved brothers and sisters, allow me to greet you once again in the greeting words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, sir.
That's a good sign. That means God is calling us.
Yes, sir.
Even as the phone is ringing, I'm reminded that God is calling us. And I want to take this subject today, hopefully to answer God's call and to give us the opportunity to answer the call of God, because we want to take this subject today called the Anti-Dote to youth violence in Memphis. And I want to begin with the sacred text that is formed by what Allah has guided the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to say. Because certainly there is great value in the biblical text. There is great value in the Quranic text. But there is also the great value in how the Bible and the Quran has been made relevant to the condition and to the struggle and to the goals and aspirations of black people in America that is found in the words of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So for me, Minister Farrakhan's words are a sacred text.
Yes, sir.
So I hope y'all don't mind us starting with some words from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan that shall guide our conversation today. Because we want to have a conversation today and we want to think. We want to certainly be edified by God's words, but we hope that if Allah blesses us to effectively deliver the message today, that we can be like what Allah says in the Quran. Allah says that the believers say, and we take Allah's color, for Allah is best at coloring. Now, that don't mean that God sits down with Crayola
Come on.
in a coloring book. No, the English word color comes from an Arabic word sibgah, which means a baptism or an immersion. It also means hue and religion. So within this context, Surah 2, ayat 138 says that believing men and women are to always take the view of God. Everybody has a view. Everybody has a point of view. Many people have opinions. Some have perspectives. But it's good to know that Allah has a perspective.
Yes, sir.
And that if I believe in him, certainly I might respect the perspective and the opinion of others. But, you know, as the old saying goes, as for me and my house,
Come on.
I want the Lord's perspective.
Yes, sir.
And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, when we took up the subject, the controversy of God's mercy, we were introduced to that reality that oftentimes our view and God's view is totally different. Fact about it, in the Bible, the great prophet Isaiah, he famously said that God said, my ways are not like your ways. My thoughts are not like your thoughts. My ways and my thoughts are from above, and your ways and your thoughts are from beneath.
Yes, sir.
So God already knows our perspective, and he ain't trying to adopt our perspective, because the fact about it is that our perspective of any situation is based on a limited set of facts and information. But we should be motivated to adopt the perspective of God, because God's perspective is based on his unlimited knowledge,
Yes,
his unlimited wisdom, his unlimited understanding. But I know a lot of us, we say, well, this is just me. I'm just doing me. Well, that's okay. But, you know, if you feel that you all right and you don't need to change, you don't need to improve, then you go your way and we see how that turns out. But I can only speak for me. None of you have deputized me to be a spokesman for you.
That's right.
So I can only speak for me. I know I need to improve. I know I need to do better. I know I want to become better. I want to be wiser. I want to be stronger. I want to be more obedient to God. I want to serve my people more. I want to be more knowledgeable and have more wisdom. So I'm striving for that which they call is they said the largest room in any house is not the master bedroom. I know y'all thought it was a master bedroom. But the largest room in any house, they say, is the room for improvement. So I want to be better, but I don't want to be better based on what some Johnny-come-lately self-help guru says. I want to be better based upon the standard of God. There's a lot of folk that can help you do self-improvement and self-development, and some of that information is all right. But a lot of it is people just trying to get followers. And I only want to follow God and his Christ and his Messiah. So we want God's perspective today, and helping us is his anointed servant, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Now, the minister says this powerful statement on his very important presence on the Breakfast Club back in 2015. He was preparing for the Justice or Else gathering in Washington, D.C., and he went on the Breakfast Club to invite the audience of the Breakfast Club to come to Washington, as we were going to go to D.C. for justice, to demand justice in the wake of all of the killings of innocent black brothers and sisters by the police and otherwise. And the minister said this. He said, our young people represent the strongest and the best generation that we ever had. They are not the wisest, but they are the best because they are fearless. When you see fearless young men and women, that's the generation that God's hand is on, because that's the generation that will fulfill the promise of the ancestors who died struggling for true freedom, justice, and liberation. The young are the generation that will deliver on that promise with the right leadership. Our subject today is the antidote. Subtitle to youth violence in Memphis. But I could remove the subtitle because youth violence is also in Chicago. Youth violence is also a problem in Atlanta. Youth violence is also a problem in Washington and New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Albuquerque and Houston and Dallas. The antidote. Now, as a student of the Word of God, I am always fascinated at what appear to be in God's Word an apparent contradiction. And I would say to us that whenever we study the Word and we see something that is an apparent contradiction, that's the sign that you now have to go deeper. A lot of us like to stay on the surface of God's Word. But be like you were when you were a child playing at the neighborhood pool and mom told you to stay in the shallow end, but you wanted to go in the deep end.
Yes, sir.
Never be afraid to go beyond the surface in the Word of God. Now, this is an apparent contradiction because I maintain that Minister Farrakhan is articulating God's view.
Yes, sir.
This is not just him trying to preach black empowerment to the downtrodden black community. This is the view of God. He has taken Allah's color in the matter. But the reality is something that we know something about. And I hope that by Allah's grace and mercy, I can help us to see why the minister has said this and why that it is 1000% right and exact. But the reality that we know something about is that which we see every day when we turn on the news. According to this article in the Tri-State Defender, listen to this. Memphis has long struggled with high rates of violent crime, especially among our youth. Teenagers and young adults commit a significant portion of the city's violent crimes. The child homicide rate in our city far exceeds national averages, while national trends point to unintentional injuries as the top cause of death among American youth. In Memphis, violence is by far the most significant threat, especially homicide by firearm. The article continues, and these are some striking statistics. For example, the leading cause of death for children ages 7 to 18 in Memphis is homicide/assault. According to Memphis Crime Stoppers, in all of 2022, there were over 70 homicide victims aged 17 or under, including at least 15 children aged 12 or under. A review of child deaths by Labana Children's Hospital found that in 2020, homicide was the cause of more than 50% of all deaths amongst Memphis youth aged 15 to 24. And more than 75% of child deaths related to violence in Memphis involve a firearm. This reflects the city's ongoing struggle with elevated rates of crime, gang activity, poverty, and other socioeconomic issues that endanger the lives of local children. Now, that doesn't seem to comport a whole lot with what Minister Farrakhan said. Seems to be, again, a contradiction. So much so that it's almost that you would have to whisper what the minister said, because if you said it openly and publicly, knowing what is going on in Memphis, people might be outraged. Because every day we're hearing something about a young black brother or a young black sister involved in some act of violent crime. So we know, and we've seen these types of mugshots of some infamous activities by young brothers in this city.
Yes, sir.
Now, what's fascinating to reflect upon is that this generation is the same as this generation.
Wow. Yes, sir.
You got the two Justins who are in Nashville fighting in the state Senate, Justin Pearson and Justin Jones. You got my young brother here from Earl, Arkansas, 18-year-old black mayor,
Yes, sir.
one of the youngest in America. Now, how are these two different pictures so different?
Come on, brother minister.
See, what is it about this group that is different from this group? See? And more importantly, which group do you think those in power want to see more of? This group or this group? See?
Good question.
Then you got, look at these, these are mayors.
Yes, sir.
You wish your mayor had a nice afro like that.
Yeah.
You be like, man, that's my man.
Man.
My brother got some knowledge of self. And he's the mayor of the city. We should all be so fortunate. Then you got a mayor like this. His name ain't John Jackson or Robert Smith. His name is Chokwe Anta Lumumba. He's the mayor, not of New York, not of Los Angeles. He's the mayor of the capital of the most racist state in American history, Mississippi.
Look out.
Then, as we were last weekend in Birmingham,
Yes, sir.
look at this young, beautiful brother. That's their mayor. See? Now you kind of getting up. We kind of reconciling what the minister was saying, right?
Come on, brother minister.
See? This is the same generation. I want to get into this a little bit deeper because, see, when we look at our youth, we forget this group.
Yes, sir.
Matter of fact, this group don't get a lot of good press.
Never.
Most of what they show us is this group.
Yep.
See? But they are a part of this same fearless generation that the minister is talking about.
Come on, brother.
But we need to know what happened to these brothers. Look into their eyes. Look into their faces. These are babies.
Yes, sir.
But something has happened to them. Now, I found some really interesting information, brothers and sisters.
Come on.
See, there's something about an oppressed people that those who oppress them, they have an understanding that they're going to one day give birth to a generation that is born to fight the oppressor.
Yes, sir.
So when you see the young brothers act like they don't have respect for authority, act like they in love with guns, act like they don't want to be in nobody's church, nobody's school, under anyone's control, that's because they were born to be fighters of the enemy.
Come on.
Do you know, beloved brothers and sisters, that they have done studies to show that during the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, all of these movements were filled with young people. Yep. And do you know they did a study, several studies, that showed that when young black people were fighting against the white power structure, crime was down.
Yes, sir.
Let that sink in. What does that mean, Brother Demetric? It means that when the youth were fighting the enemy, they were not fighting one another.
Yes, sir. Come on, brother.
According to this study, civil rights activity and reduction in crime among Negroes. Don't y'all be offended. They used to call us Negroes. And when I was a little child, my parents told me if they call you a nigger, tell them you ain't no nigger, you a nigger-ro. Look at what they have to say. Data are presented which suggest a substantial reduction in crimes of violence by Negroes in 3 cities during periods of organized protests and direct action for civil rights in those cities. The findings are based on official crime reports, medical records, newspaper accounts, and interviews with residents of the 3 communities, 2 cities in the Deep South and 1 in a border state. It is hypothesized that Negroes release long dammed up resentment of segregation by asserting themselves directly and vicariously in direct action for civil rights. Such emotional expression, when it occurs in a framework of community organization, may reduce the need for aggressive outbursts in a violent sort, thus reducing the incidence of such crimes. We note that further research into the functioning of the civil rights movement may produce fruitful implications for programs to prevent crime and battle poverty. Wow.
Wow, man.
Look at that. See, so let's go back. See, in the 60s, they would have been maybe with Dr. King, SCLC.
Yes, sir.
Maybe with Stokely Carmichael and SNCC. Maybe with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam.
Yes, sir.
But they wouldn't be breaking in your house. They wouldn't be trying to take your car. They wouldn't be robbing stores. There wouldn't be black on black violence in the streets. Because that which God birthed them into the world to do, they found an outlet to do it in the collective struggle of our people for freedom, justice, and equality. See? Same generation.
Yes, sir.
Did you know that they have also found that youth activism is good for youth health and overall well-being? In other words, the young people involved in fighting against the enemy have better health. Think over that.
Man.
Better mental well-being.
Yes, sir.
Now think about how often nowadays we hear about the mental health crisis in black youth.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Could it be that at the root of it is their dissatisfaction with the current world that we live in, where every institution is diametrically opposed to black humanity? Could it be that they are the generation of hope and fulfillment, promise and deliverance. So young people being involved in the struggle keeps the crime rate low. But I guess if you are the people that the young people are fighting and agitating against, you don't want to see them involved in that struggle.
That's right.
Our young brothers, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, they wasn't in the Tennessee state representative's house. I don't think they were there a year before they were kicked out.
Yes, sir. They weren't.
On trumped up charges. And every time they show these beautiful brothers on the news, you see them fighting in the state house in Tennessee for what's good for our people, which is what is good for the whole state. So you got to know, brother and sister, they don't want no more of those little young brothers and sisters filling up the state houses around the country.
That's right. That's right.
But that's what they were born to do. I found it fascinating. There's a lot of history on this. In this report entitled Black Youth Activism and the Reconstruction of America, it states, since the early 20th century, young people have been instrumental in reconstructing American political culture and the social and political life of African Americans, i.e. black folk.
Yes, sir.
From the NAACP Youth Council and the Southern Negro Youth Congress in the 1930s and 1940s to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and Student Organization for Black Unity in the 1960s and 70s, young people were the front line activists during the two major protest waves of the 20th century. Young blacks then helped to propel the Pan-African and black nationalist movement. And in this report, they give a breakdown of all of the different black organizations and black movements where young people were in the leadership. And don't forget now, when they were involved in these movements, crime was very, very low.
Wow.
Especially that pernicious type of crime and violence that we know something about, black on black crime. It was even written about in the Muhammad Speaks newspaper. This study, Negro crimes drops in the South, busy with the right struggle.
Right struggle.
Do you know that there is something called natural male aggression
Yes, sir.
that has to be properly guided and channeled? This is why in suburban neighborhoods, they always have programs for young men to be involved in to be an outlet to natural male aggression. Boxing leagues, AAU sports,
Yes, sir.
Boy Scouts and Eagle Scouts, and the wise in the white community understand when a young man gets to a certain age, he becomes to transition into manhood. And the nature of a man is a protector. So that means a man has to have a certain warrior aspect to himself.
That's right.
But if it's not guided and channeled properly,
Talk to us.
it can be misdirected and redirected such that young men will become violent towards one another and the people in their neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
There's a famous study of elephants in Africa. You probably have heard of it. Well, there was a particular elephant reserve in Africa that they studied. And something caused the people who control the reserve, they removed all of the older male elephants from the reserve. And they put them somewhere to basically just, because after they wasn't no mate no more, you know what I mean? They was kind of old. I mean, they was in the eyes of the, they weren't zookeepers, but they was over a wildlife preserve, that the older males didn't have no more value.
Yes, sir.
So they put them out to pasture. to graze and just chill out and do nothing and basically to die.
Yes, sir.
But they noticed something when they left the young males and the females in the original preserve. After a short amount of time, the young male elephants began to tear up everything. And they even broke free from the preserve and began to attack the townspeople.
That's right. That's right. Yes, sir.
They said they call it must, but there's something like it's not going into heat, but is a condition that the young male goes through as he transitions into adulthood, where he has a lot of aggression. See, he has a lot of energy.
Yes, sir.
See, and while the older males were present, they had a stabilizing presence
Come on, Miss Rose.
in that preserve. So the young male elephants, they were able to learn from the older male elephants how to conduct themselves,
Yes, sir. Come on.
how to act, how to be around the female,
Yes, sir.
the limits upon which they should go in the preserve. In other words, the older males were the father figures.
Yes, sir.
But when they removed the older males,
Come on.
everything went haywire. Chaos ensued because that natural male aggression had no blueprint, model, or pattern for how it should be expressed. See? And you know that scene in wildlife nature has played out in black communities in America. See?
Yes, sir.
Y'all all right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
When your babies are involved in what God has ordained for them to be born into the world for, to fight against the enemy, they ain't out here committing crime and violence. Here's another article. Crime rate go all the way down when the youth are fighting the enemy. There's a great documentary I would encourage you to watch on HBO. It came out in 2005 called Bastards of the Party. And that phrase comes from a book called City of Quartz, where the writer, who is a local historian in Los Angeles, wrote about how the gangs, because everybody knows Los Angeles is one of those cities where neighborhoods still have a strong gang presence. And in the book, he talked about how during the days of the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, you didn't have the kind of criminal activity among young blacks that you started to see in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s because of the Panthers. Us, Nation of Islam. See? The struggle was the channel for the youth to express their natural male and sometimes female
Of course.
aggression.
Yes, sir.
That's right, because the sisters are warriors too.
I know that's right.
And no movement is going anywhere without the sisters.
That's right.
But he says, but the combined efforts of the FBI and notorious COINTELPRO program and the LAPD's Public Disorder Intelligence Division, a super red squad that until 1982 maintained surveillance on every suspicious group from the Panthers to the National Council of Churches, were concentrated upon destroying Los Angeles's Black Power vanguards. That word is familiar to us, vanguard. Those in the forefront. Said that the government was trying to keep tabs on who's in the vanguard. Said, as even the LA Times recognized, the decimation of the Panthers led directly to a recrudescence of gangs in the early 1970s. 76 Crippen, the most extraordinary new gang phenomenon, was a, quote, bastard offspring of the Panthers' former charisma, filling the void left by the LAPD SWAT team. So in other words, when they destroyed the Panthers, when they destroyed black organizations under COINTELPRO, it leaves a void.
Yes, sir.
Well, you've heard that old expression from the world of science, nature hates a void, nature hates a vacuum. So what filled it? The young males in our community without any guide, without any way to channel their aggression in the ordained way it is to be channeled. See, as we talk about here now, God has ordained this generation of black youth to rise to fight against the white power structure in America. That's why most of our children are not really satisfied. Mom can give them PlayStation 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Still ain't satisfied. Have a closet full of Jordans. Still ain't satisfied. All the ladies' clothes. Still ain't satisfied. All the money you want, the women you want, the men you want, whatever you want. You were not born to be satisfied by the acquisition of material things. That which produces soul satisfaction is the achievement of your purpose in life.
Yes, sir.
As we talked about before, we all come to life racing as a tiny microscopic sperm cell to reach the egg. You think you did all of that just to have a flat screen TV? See, if you understood more about what it takes to actually be born, you realize that you must have a greater purpose in life than working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week for a paycheck on Friday.
Really?
Week in, week out, week in, week out, day in, day out. And until you and I find our purpose, there's nothing else that will really satisfy us.
That's right.
That's why when you see a man like Minister Farrakhan, he'll come out and he'll preach for 4 or 5 hours. Then he'll go back and host a dinner for 50, 60 people and teach for another 3 or 4 hours.
Yes, sir.
Now, the only way a man could do that is that he has accepted that that is his role or destiny or purpose in life. See, there's certain things, I don't care if you're in it, if you're in it for self-aggrandizement, or if you go into it for money or fame, you won't last too long in certain things.
That's right.
And during the mission of the resurrection of black people, I'm just here to tell you, if you're in it for money and fame, go do something else.
Yes, sir.
Because if this is not a part of your purpose or destiny in life, then you won't really be successful at doing it. You'll do it for a little while. And you say, oh man, this is too tough. But look at Minister Farrakhan, who began this journey in 1955 and hasn't let up. He's 90 by Allah's grace on May 11th. Put that on your calendar. That's the birth anniversary of Minister Farrakhan. He'll be 91 years of age. All praise is due to Allah. And he just spoke at 90 for 3 hours, standing on his feet, had saved his day. Until he said, I'm a little bit tired, but I ain't going to stop teaching. I'm just going to teach from a seated position. See, that's because the minister is an example of how energized you are when you find your purpose in life. See, now, Satan don't want the youth to be preoccupied with fighting him. Now, there's a very important passage from the Holy Quran I want to share with you, and I want to give it to you in several translations. Each of the translations I appreciate because the translator in each one makes it plainer and plainer. This is from Surah 22 of the Holy Quran, ayats 52 through 53. Listen at this, brother and sister. And we never sent a messenger or a prophet before thee, but when he desired, the devil made a suggestion respecting his desire, but Allah annuls that which the devil casts. Then Allah established his messages, and Allah is knowing, wise, that he may make what the devil casts a trial for those in whose hearts is a disease, and the hard-hearted, and surely the wrongdoers are in severe opposition. That's the Maulana Muhammad Ali translation. The Muhammad Assad translation, I think, goes a step further in making it plainer. He says, yet whenever we sent forth any apostle or prophet before thee, and he was hoping that his warnings would be heeded, Satan would cast an aspersion on his innermost aims, but God renders null and void whatever aspersion Satan may cast. The clear Quran makes it even clearer. Whenever we sent a messenger or a prophet before you, O Prophet Muhammad, and he recited our revelations, Satan would influence people's understanding of his recitation. But eventually, Allah would eliminate Satan's influence. Why is this so important? Because it helps us to understand that God have given birth to a fearless generation whose destiny and purpose is to help their people achieve liberation by fighting the enemy. But Satan has interfered with that. And he has caused the youth, instead of fighting him, to fight one another.
Yes, sir.
Do you know that throughout J. Edgar Hoover's memos, he talked about keeping black nationalist groups from attracting the youth?
That's right.
He said efforts of various groups to consolidate their forces or to recruit youthful adherents must be frustrated. So you wonder why it's sometimes hard to get your children to go to a meeting. Because from this point on, society has been structured around redirecting black youth's interests away from the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality.
That's right.
He says no opportunity should be missed to exploit through counterintelligence techniques the organizational and the personal conflicts of the leaderships of the groups. And where possible, an effort should be made to capitalize upon existing conflicts between competing black nationalist organizations. He says the final goal should be to prevent the long-range growth of militant black nationalist organizations, especially among the youth. Specific tactics to prevent these groups from converting young people must be developed. Now think of this, brother and sister. See, this is a man that's wickedly wise.
Yes, sir.
He's looking at the landscape of black America. He's looking at the black community through what kind of lens? See, I started out talking about how believers are to develop Allah's perspective.
Come on, brother minister.
Well, don't you know if there are those who want to develop Allah's perspective? With Afro beats in the background?
Yes, sir.
There are those who also want to develop Satan's perspective.
Always.
So Mr. Hoover is in development of Satan's perspective. See, there are those that look at us not from the perspective of God, but from the perspective of Satan, whom the Bible calls the God of this world.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So Hoover has taken his God's coloring
That's right.
and said, I can't let this generation of black youth grow into who they are destined to be. He said, goals of this program are to prevent the growth of these groups among youth. Now look, in COINTELPRO, look at all of the groups he was talking about. Y'all see who we got highlighted in red?
Yes, sir. In red.
The Nation of Islam. He continued, consideration should be given to preclude black rabble-rouser leaders of these hate groups from spreading their philosophy publicly or through the communications media. In other words, keep them out of the press. Now, brother and sister, just to show you how that verse in the Quran becomes real in our history. Now, they did everything they could to destroy all of those groups. The only one that's still strong and viable is the nation.
Yes, sir.
And it shows that, as that verse in the Quran says, Satan plans against the desire of God and his messenger. But then God brings it to another. I want to show you this. See? This is the discovery of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad inside hip hop music. And it angered the powers that be. This was published in 1991, where it says Elijah Muhammad, the longtime leader of the Nation of Islam, is having a deep influence on rap music 15 years after his death. Their words, not mine.
Yes, sir.
Because I believe he's alive. Says, with unprecedented directness, a number of new rappers are quoting Muhammad's core dogma that white people are a race of devils and snakes, and that African Americans are descendants from the tribe of Shabazz, the original man created by Allah. See, that's the kind of hip hop that assisted me in joining the nation in 1990 as a teenager. Because I could hear the Muslim ministers, I could hear the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on a tape. Then if I went and played the tape of my favorite rapper, my favorite rapper was echoing what Minister Farrakhan and his ministers were saying.
That's right.
So as a youth, I was boxed in. See? Hip hop, the music of my coming of age, echoed the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
That's right.
And do you know what happened right after this? Hip hop changed. This is around the time when you saw the morphing of hip hop into gangster rap. See? You ever wonder, why did the music change? See, Hoover said, don't let these groups attract young people. Well, hey, to them, Elijah Muhammad had established a beachhead smack dab in the middle of youth culture.
That's right.
They saw this growing phenomenon of youth culture called hip hop that even in those days was becoming global.
That's right.
And they say, you mean that this popular new music that's attracting young people is laced with Elijah Muhammad's ideas? See, some of you may not know or remember when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan stood to rebuild the nation. In 1981 was the first Savior's Day of the rebuilding. And at that time, he revealed to the world his belief that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad escaped a death plot and was alive. And he had documentation of how there were doctors at Mercy Hospital after the so-called death of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad celebrating, saying we took care of that problem.
That's right.
So how do you think they felt when he shows back up in the music? So they had to hurry to devise a plan to change the music and remove the influence of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. At this same time, they saw his servant also there. This article says militant rap fighting the power. Playing a substantial role in this genre is the black Muslim group led by Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam. The group preaches that whites are the root of all evil, that they have stripped blacks of their culture, and that drugs, guns, and AIDS of the ghetto are part of the white plot to suppress blacks. I'm always tickled at how they report about us, you know, because they take what we teach and they frame it in a way that would make a reasonable person think that we're bad people. And then on the other side, they block us from having access to mainstream airways. See, somebody, but that's the reason why TikTok and these social media platforms have become problematic. Somebody sent me a video the other day of a young white woman in a what they call a remixed reel on social media. And she was on one half of the screen and Minister Farrakhan was on the other half describing the Muslim prayer. This was from Savior's Day 1998, where he was at the rostrum and he was going through all of the positions and he even got down and prostrated. He had a beautiful green robe on. And the young white lady was just sitting there watching it. And at a certain point, she began to weep, see, which shows that if Minister Farrakhan was allowed the freedom and access to the airwaves, he could produce agreement with the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad among black, brown, red, yellow, white. A few years ago, many of the A-list celebrities in Hollywood, they discovered Minister Farrakhan's old Donahue appearance.
Yes, sir.
I mean, big time people like Chelsea Handler and the people that was on Will and Grace. See? And they were sharing Minister Farrakhan's response to one of the questions. All of these A-list celebrities, they was excited. They said, see what he's saying, we agree with him. Because the reality of it is, brothers and sisters, all these little dishonest, I'm not going to call them dishonest, but I would say disingenuous.
Yes.
Folk who claim to speak for black people. Wise folk in the white power structure know that their stuff ain't gonna work.
Yes, sir.
And they know that it is often a censored response to what black folk are actually experiencing. So most of them appreciate when they hear from black voices the unvarnished truth of what their actions have done to us. See? Because the reality of it is there's a generation born among them too.
That's right.
That don't want the way of their fathers. That's why Master Fard Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, said he's born to give justice to both. And as we talked about last week, God speaks of in the Bible that he made certain vessels for wrath. But the vessel that's made for wrath at the time of the day of judgment gets a chance to choose.
Yes, sir.
I remember the minister elucidating one time about how christenings take place in Catholicism. And the priest says to those being christened, and do you deny Satan and all of his works? Because in order to be right with Christ, you have to utter a disavowal of Satan.
Yes, sir.
And it has to be of your own free will, your own free volition. Just like in classical Islam, you have to utter a shahada. You have to declare of your own free will. There's no compulsion. You got to recognize and realize, I believe and I bear witness that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger. So in Catholicism, they enter into the faith. You got to deny Satan in all of his works. Y'all ain't ready for that conversation.
Go ahead, brother. Come on.
Now, the nation. Do you know of all of those groups? The government targeted the nation more than any other group. Now, most of the time on these documentaries, they only focus on the Panthers. But as Professor Matthias Gardel wrote in his book, In the Name of Elijah Muhammad, Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, he says, no research, however, has focused directly on the federal conspiracy against the Nation of Islam. This is all the more remarkable since the Nation of Islam outnumbered most, if not all, of the organizations mentioned above and was targeted prior to these. The FBI interest in the Nation of Islam is reflected in the Security Index, a listing of prominent dissidents dating back to 1939. Now remember, COINTELPRO wasn't documented until the late 60s. The largest category listed 673 members of the Nation of Islam, followed by 476 communists. That's striking because, publicly speaking, America said communism was her greatest fear.
That's right.
At this time. Said Russia, we at war with communism, communist Russia. Yet privately, they were very much more afraid of the presence of Islam among you.
That's right.
Now, with all of that targeting, I think it's important to appreciate that even though Satan has always wanted to destroy the nation, over and over again, the nation has proven to be nonviolent. Check out some of these important quotes. Although the NOI preaches hatred of whites, we don't preach hatred of whites. They have never implemented this hatred by riot or planned violence. That is a quote from the special agent in charge of Cleveland, Ohio, in an internal FBI memo to J. Edgar Hoover. Professor Martha F. Lee wrote, in many ways, the Nation of Islam provides a case study of why and how a religious movement with a radical belief system did not engage in violence related to its doctrine. Its members waited in faith for Allah to destroy the forces that oppressed them. Instead, it was law enforcement agencies that more actively fostered violence in the hope of destroying the Nation of Islam. Look at what Jewish Rabbi Bruce Kahn had to say. He attended the Million Man March. He says, it seems clear to me that despite what I consider to be horrifying insults that have issued from the minister, the people who listen to him do not go chasing down Jews or gays or whites or Koreans to beat them and murder them. They do not do that for two reasons. First, he warns them against such violent behavior. Second, these verbal onslaughts do not constitute the main thrust of his message. As unacceptable as they are to me, this is the rabbi saying it, they are also tangential. His listeners know that. They are sufferers who know how tough it is to get a fair shake as black people. They want to change that. They hear in Minister Farrakhan's words inspiration and instruction to begin to bring about that change. That is the message on which he focuses and on which they focus. That is not the message on which the media focuses. William Alpert's study makes that clear. This is Rabbi Bruce Kahn responding to Chaplain William Alpert's excellent report called the Trotter Report, where he documented how the media abused Minister Farrakhan during the time of the Million Man March. Now, as we conclude, I want to talk about this generation and its connection to the Messiah. Before I do that, I thought about how Satan is reacting to our young people awakening. And it reminded me of something from the history of Prophet Muhammad. Have you noticed, I don't know how many of you keep up with popular culture. I do. If you work with people, you should probably do so also. That's right. Because in American society, the leading influence is not religion. It's not even politics, it's popular culture. And in hip hop culture, A brother, friend of mine, student minister Willie Muhammad, he and I were talking. He's the student minister in New Orleans. And we both come up during the heyday, if you will, of hip hop music. And we were talking and said, man, have you noticed, seemed like out of nowhere, all these beefs have appeared?
Really? Yes, sir. Come on now.
I mean, there was J. Cole versus Kendrick Lamar, Rick Ross versus Drake, Chris Brown versus Quavo. And we was like, where did all this come from? It just seemed like out of nowhere. See? And I thought about it. I said, you know, it's interesting that this is taking place in the black community that, again, is influenced by popular culture heavily, while the government is involved in a war involving Israel, the Palestinians, and now Iran. And it reminded me of something from the history of the prophet. Check this out, brother and sister. Author Betty Kellen, in her book, The Messenger of God, Muhammad, she talks about this episode during the life of the prophet. She says, one day a Jewish businessman passed by a group of young Muslims laughing together and could hardly believe his eyes. They were Aus and Khazraj, behaving like friends. Those were two tribes in Medina. Such a short time back, they had been at one another's throats, dragging all Medina, Jews and Arabs alike, into a frenzy of killing. It gave this man to wonder if something much worse might not happen to Jews if Arabs should cease to squabble. He sent out young Jews into the streets to remind the Aus and the Khazraj of their old bitterness wherever they were seen consorting, and to start whatever other trouble they could.
Wow.
Let's think about that. That's sick, isn't it?
Very.
See, Muhammad had caused the tribes who were beefing to resolve their conflict peacefully, and many of them came under the umbrella of Islam. And even though before Muhammad, they saw each other as rival tribes. Think gangs. Think East Coast versus West Coast. Think North versus South. They were rivals. But Muhammad united them, and he didn't just resolve their conflict. That's the low level.
Really?
But he made them see each other as brothers.
Yes, sir.
That's high level. And yet, the history says a Jewish businessman. Who controls black music? Jewish businessmen.
Yes.
See? And right now, black youth are abandoning President Biden. Why are they abandoning him? Because he's too slow about calling for a ceasefire in Gaza.
That's right.
And even though that conflict has been brewing for decades, see, you never had the phenomenon in those early decades of what they call the citizen journalist. See, right here, I know you didn't go to journalism school. I know you didn't major in mass communications. But these are your credentials as a citizen journalist. Because now, through the advent of the smartphone camera, people don't have to wait on CBS, NBC, ABC to tell us what's happening on the ground, even in distant parts of the world. People go live right there while the bombs are falling. They take pictures of the children with their limbs blown off. And if you have any ounce of humanity within you, you are compelled to condemn that as an act of genocide. They can say what they want to say about South Africa, our people down in South Africa being led by a black Muslim sister.
Yes, sir.
A powerful, brilliant black woman who's a Muslim. She organized the charges of genocide against Israel in the World Court of Justice.
That's right.
So while we trying to keep up with, oh man, why J. Cole won't fight back against Kendrick? See, the real fight back is that South Africa have fought back against Israel.
Yes, sir.
How come you don't know about that? How come you don't know about your brothers and sisters in Nicaragua? They doing the same against Germany for being a collaborator with Israel's genocide. See? So the real beefs, you don't know nothing about them. Because popular culture got you wondering, well, is Drake going to respond to Rick Ross? I don't understand. They was just on Certified Lover Boy together. But there's tumult brewing in geopolitics.
Yes, sir.
And most of our babies don't know nothing about it.
Absolutely.
Because at a certain point, they may give you a phone call, brother. Huh? Give you a phone call, young sister. And say, Uncle Sam needs you.
Yes.
We have to go and fight the terrorists in Iran. How are you going to answer that call? See? Muhammad Ali said, well, you might as well go ahead and clean up my cell and take me to jail, because I ain't going. Jail ain't that bad, brother. I mean, it's bad. But now, the reality of it is, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was willing to go to prison.
That's right.
He said Allah had told him that once he registered with Allah, he didn't have to register with Satan.
That's what he said.
And you know, they did not have a response from Mr. Muhammad.
That's right.
See? A lot of us think we so smart and intelligent. Well, I'm a conscientious objector. Well, you're citing a law that he wrote, but he didn't write it for you. He wrote it for folk like President Trump and other of the children of the elite to be able to absent themselves when the poor get drafted and conscripted into war. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad just sailed right over that cheap argument of a conscientious objector and made them confront his teacher.
That's right.
He told me I was registered with him. See, that's why y'all think that getting registered in the nation, that's just some basic entry procedure into the nation. It's deeper than that. See? A register is a roster. That's a list of names that Master Fard Muhammad has of those that belong to him. Now, he came to claim the whole 17 million, as we were numbered at that time, with the 2 million Indians. See? But the basis of his claim is those that have been voluntarily asked to register with him. I learned that, Brother Lamar, the other day when they were voting for a union on the job. And they said that everybody didn't vote, but it's all right. We got enough votes. So the few that voted, the whole union comes in and represents everybody, even the ones that didn't vote. See, so those of us that registered with Master Fard Muhammad, we represent all of those that haven't registered yet. He laid claim for all of us on the basis of the roster that those who registered with him. Y'all all right?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, brother.
Look at this, brother and sister. This is from 1876. The caption says, now this is I want you to understand what it is. An old white cracker in the South and a little black child that he's murdered. And the caption says, Southern chivalry, quote, in self-defense, if I hadn't have killed you, you would have grown up to rule me. Think about that. If I hadn't killed you, you would have grown up to rule me. That's why there's so much trouble surrounding your and my children.
Come on.
They have a divine destiny. They're born to rule. So they're dissatisfied with this world. They're dissatisfied with this world's religion, this world's politics, this world's economics, this world's culture. And because the enemy has fought the divinely ordained leadership, they're out here without that leadership, and they don't even realize themselves why they are the way they are. What makes this so important, look at what the Harper's Weekly said about this image. This image dramatically condemns the brutal racism of some white Southerners against blacks. The white man has killed a black child and his plea is self-defense. It exemplifies the perspective among Southern whites that Reconstruction had led to black rule. The cartoon appeared just a few weeks before the presidential election. See, that presidential election was in 1877.
That's right.
It became known as the Compromise of 1877, or later historians dubbed it the Great Betrayal of the Negro.
That's right.
See, you don't know much about Reconstruction. You should study it. Because you'll see in Reconstruction from 1865 to 1877, you'll see the plan, the program and position of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad on display in black history. Because from 1865 to 1877, your and my forefathers and foremothers left the plantations and went and built towns and cities in a period of space of time of 12 years. You know why? Because they knew that to live among their slave masters would mean that they would always live under their slave master. Brother and sister, they ain't have no high school diploma. They ain't have no bachelor's degree, no master's degree, no PhD degree. But see, you have to understand when you see those beautiful mansions on plantations, the slaves built those.
That's right. Free.
So we knew carpentry. We knew masonry.
Come on.
We knew landscaping,
Yes, sir.
agriculture, horticulture. Not from learning it in some classroom, but from learning it from actual experience. And we left the plantation and took our skills with us. And we built 60 to 80, some scholars say over 120
That's right.
town. You've only heard of Black Wall Street and you think you know something. Black Wall Street is the tip of the iceberg
That's right.
of when your and my forefathers and mothers had the mind to do for self, leaving the plantation. And that's why devils like this saw that, said, my God, if they can do that in 12 years, it's only a matter of time before they rule the country. They understand this is a messianic generation. Look at what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said. I'm always fascinated by this quote because it again conflicts with the way most of us think. Listen to what he says. He says, the white man of America is well informed through his scientists and scholars who are paid just for studying the problems of prophecy, and especially the future destruction of America, which he knows is fast coming. His greatest mental burden and physical strain at the present time is how to prevent the spread of Islam among his ex-servitude slaves in these last days. Think over that. He says that the rulers of America have people that they pay, not for studying how good prophecy is, the problems of prophecy. Well, who is the prophecy a problem for? Prophecy is a problem for the wicked. Prophecy and its fulfillment is a problem for Pharaoh, Herod, those who enslaved the children of Israel, those who laid waste to the people of God. And from their informed position relative to prophecy, they oppose us. Y'all all right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I'm looking at where we are here. And this might be a good time to do a part 2. Because I don't want to rush through this critical and important subject. And I hope that you all have enjoyed this part of it. Because again, remember the goal. We want God's view. We want God's perspective. Even as we wake up in the morning and it's hard. Because the editors and those in charge of newsrooms, I guess they don't have any sensitivity that if you start off every morning telling the citizens of the city about the murders that happened at night, that's not good for the mental well-being of the citizens. So you either had to turn the news off or you had to have some elevated perspective to be able to look at that and not be just totally brought down into a funk to start your day or your week with. I normally like to watch the news in the morning. What's the weather? What's going on? What do I need to be abreast of in the city? But the leading news story is always murder. No wonder in this society, the greeting at the beginning of the day is good morning. Put the you back in the word. Good morning. When is it ever good to mourn? But we greet one another in this kind of evil world. Good morning. Because it's a society dedicated to death. And that's why there is a prophecy where God told his people that your covenant with death shall be annulled. And I bear witness, brother and sister, Allah is on scene today.
Yes, sir.
To annul our covenant with death. And that is represented in the transformative ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Because even though Satan is doing everything he can to stop the spread of Islam, even though Satan is doing everything he can to keep the ears of our babies from hearing the message of Minister Farrakhan, there are people every day all over the world taking their shahada. There are people every day all over the world discovering Minister Farrakhan on the internet. And so as the minister famously said, you can do what you want to do to me. I can't die. He said, I'm down even into the unborn babies. You can kill the flesh, Satan, but you can't kill a man that is actually the physical embodiment of an idea. You ever see these memes people have? They may show some angry person, and the meme may say, if mess around and find out was a person. I mean, if the idea of the divine destiny, if the idea of liberation for black people was a person, if God's love was a person, it would look like Louis Farrakhan. So, beloved brothers and sisters, we're going to let this be the last slide for today. But if you thought that this was good information, and you know people that are concerned about what's going on and want to have an understanding of what's going on with our young people, invite them to come out next week for part 2 of the Anti-Dote. May Allah continue to bless us. I leave you as I came before you in the green words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum.